Well, first of all, good afternoon for those that are in the Central Time Zone. Uh, First of all, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Some of you guys are also, guys and gals, are either finished your lunch or getting ready to go to lunch. So in between that, again, thank you for your time. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, my name is Christopher Colbert. I'm the operations director here at Macrofab. Been doing prototyping for quite a long while, roughly around 25 years, different industries. With that being said, I'm going to introduce you to Brian Fields. Brian, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Brian Fields. I'm a sales engineer here for Macrofab. Background is in oil and gas product development, as well as working for various contract manufacturers in a project management capacity for a few years as well. So working with the sales team on the front end to ensure all our kind of technical specifications are met and really a first line of defense here for our customers.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the North American electronics prototyping, right? Risks and benefits. This is not really scripted by any means, so it's all coming verbatim from in here out, right? So throughout the event, if you guys and gals have any questions, please feel free to ask. You know, there's no such thing as a bad question. Utilize our experience and ask away. With that being said, can we go ahead and bump that slide up one? There you go, one more. So our agenda is just talking about the different factors, identifying risks, Asia versus North America, advantages of North American-based prototyping, key takeaways. Next. So when we talk about prototyping, right, there's been different ways. Like throughout my career, all the way back many moons ago, you know, engineers would come to us with breadboards, you know, axial radial components, say, hey, can you please build this for us? We need it like yesterday. And they'll bring us devices. We would actually, you know, build them up, stuff like that. It's since changed since then. Nowadays, you know, boards are a little more robust. You know, there's board houses out there that can actually turn a quick turn board relatively fast within a couple of days. There's even 3D printing machines out there that can 3D print a PCBA, right? What we do here at Macrofab, for example, is, you know, we also different services, you know, different services in regards to, you know, a one build to a couple hundred build or whatever. But from a prototyping stance, the whole key is making sure that number one, the design is right and that you have ample amount of time to build it. I know most of you at some point in your life went to bed, had a dream, like, man, I have the next best thing. I'm going to build this thing. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. And in doing so, you're like, well, how can I get there? How can I do that? And you do a Google search. You do a look on the net for it, and you find out, wow, someone's already thought of it. It's a bummer, right? But when it comes to prototyping, the thing about it is when you first get that idea, right? It's thinking about how it's going to, you know, change something, make something easier, make something more robust. But when you go to actually produce it, you want to make sure that you work with a company that's going to give you what you need. Now, there's a lot of companies out there that say, hey, look, I can do a 10-day turn, a 15-day turn, or whatever, right? But the key point of this is to make sure that your prototype is built correct the first time. There's a lot of times when you're producing boards that the engineer may be at a time crunch and they need to deploy this thing relatively quick. And in doing so, there may be a design issue. Brian, would you say that happens quite often?
Yeah, especially with new designs and new technology. You know, it's fairly rare that someone's gonna show up and say, hey, you know, I need quick turn prototypes built for a board with 2 or 3 parts on it, very simple, you know, kind of older technology. What we see the majority of the time is that people are trying to push the envelope, both in terms of like the product life cycle, like the product development life cycle, and with regards to the technology and what it can do, right? So you've got firmware teams working in concert with hardware teams, with product development teams and product owners. So everyone's trying to do their job at the same time so that we can get the product to market faster. And that can really complicate measures to get it done accurately, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of it comes down to, like, even you know, if you look at the slide right here, you know, about reshoring, right, trying to bring jobs back to the States. You know, a lot of our customers were like, man, I need something super fast. Let me go hit up Asia. You know, they get the boards turned around quick, but there's a risk, right? There's always a risk. There's a risk in the quality, IP, you know, that can steal designs. Whereas if you reshore and you bring it back to the States, more than likely, you know, you're putting it into a shop that really cares about the product. And that's what I want to kind of touch base on a little bit, is quality, right? A lot of people like to rush. Oh man, I need this thing now. But typically when that happens, that haste makes waste. I hate to say that, but it's true. If you rush a product through and you're trying to push this prototype as fast as possible, and obviously the quality technician is not really thinking on the quality, they're just trying to produce on a quick rate, that leads to a negative customer experience. And that's where one thing is to be late, but to also have a quality defect. That just escalates it and leads to an upset customer. So typically, you know, what I've been seeing here in the States is just about the trade skill. A lot of people are like, oh, wow, you know, soldering, it's easy. Well, okay, if you ask a solderer, they'll say, yeah, it's pretty easy. But we got to remember, it's a trade skill. I know some of you guys and gals are, you know, outside of Texas, but in Texas, we have this place called Buc-ee's, right? So if you do a long trip, you're going out to San Antonio or Dallas or whatever, you're going to hit up Buc-ee's. You're going to fill up your gas tank. You're going to get some beaver nuggets and some drink. Well, the other day, I was taking my son to college in San Antonio, and I was pumping gas, and I look up at the sign, and it says, hiring, $18 an hour. And I was like, oh, wow. You know, it's looking at that alone. I'm like, wow, this a person can go and be an employee at Buc-ee's for $18 an hour, whereas domestically, some of our manufacturers are paying some of our employees like $14 or $15 to do a trade skill, and that's soldering, right? And that's unfortunate. And a lot of these times, it's like we miss out on the opportunity, and that opportunity is to keep growing that knowledge base and expertise to deliver you the best quality. You wouldn't say, hey, I want you guys to build my boards for me, and I want you to put a person who's making burgers to build your product, right? No, you'd want an experienced person to the trade skill. And so looking at this slide here, looking about the 83% manufacturing, I can see that happening. One of my previous employers, we actually had a big bid, and it was a lot of boards. We were building their products, had zero quality defects. Great customer to work with, everything was right. Well, they got, from their corporate side, they were told, hey, we're gonna go ahead and move this over to Asia. It's cheaper, you know, it's gonna cost us much less, and I'm sorry, we're gonna move on from you guys. And we said, okay, no problem, you know, it is what it is. We shook their hands and they moved on. After that happened, within 1 year, they came back to us.
Chris, we had a question as far as, was there a specific driver for these people coming back or wanting to come back to reshore their jobs to America?
Quality. That's the answer is going to be quality. That particular one I'm actually referring to, that was built in Asia. I'm talking thousands upon thousands of boards, actually tens of thousands of boards. So they had so many quality problems from Asia that they really had no choice but to come back to the States. And when they did, we welcomed them in opening arms. You know, we're like, hey, come on back. And it did, and that company was actually successful again. But you know, it's trial and error, right? You can't really harm the customer for wanting to try it out, and it led to a negative experience. So ideally, a lot of these were going to be quality related issues. I'm not gonna lie to you. In Asia, man, they can build boards fast. They can fabricate boards pretty quick, and they can actually produce the boards quick, but at a risk, right? And that risk could be, like we said before, is, you know, IT or even the quality side of things. So
I think we have that on the next slide, so we may want to move forward onto that.
And with that being said, Brian, did you have any experiences in the past when it comes to, like, you know, products either being, you know, built overseas, you know, coming back abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really hit on quality, and that's the one that everyone really brings front of mind, right? Because it is so important to get a high quality product. But there's other aspects to that, to running a quality organization. And so, like, there's quality of communication, there's quality of logistics, there's quality, there's like environmental quality. And so what we see is people say, okay, well, I'm having issues with device quality, right? and specifications not being met. I'm also having problems with logistics quality. Like my items are, stuck, a mile offshore in a container and I can't get to them. I've got problems with communication quality. I keep getting told, oh, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. And so the sum of these issues can lead people to want to bring those projects back to the U.S.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That the whole procurement thing, supply chain constraints, that's huge, and that's not just here domestically, that's global, right? And a lot of that leads to, the products, right? Not even prototyping alone. It can even be legacy products, right? If you have a customer and they're producing something that's been being built for the past 20 years, you're running into some lead times in excess of a year and a half in some regards. And even some of these prototypes, by the time a engineer comes up like, okay, I want to have these 5 protos built, and this is the design I'm looking at, and here's my bill of materials with my AVLs on it. Maybe by the time he or she deploys that prototype, it could be obsolete already, because it just depends on the market and how things are going. So that's why it's very encouraging to make sure that we let all the engineers know to always have alternates. Have an alternate part if you can. Design around a potential risk of a part being obsolete or obsolescence, right?
Oh, that's so true, man. Like you have to, what we see customers doing now is, because the way it used to work is you got to do this kind of linearly. You got to get a schematic, and you design a board, you do your layout, and then you make your bill of materials and you send it over to contract manufacturer. They give you a quote and they build you the boards, blah, blah, blah. So what we're seeing people get into the trap of is they will put that design into the hands of the contract manufacturer. They'll come back and say, well, I can't find these 5 key components. They have a lead time of 1 year. So they go back to the drawing board, respin the board, come up with alternates, give it back to the CM, and we say, yeah, man, so now I can't find a different 5 parts. And so what we're seeing particularly well-adjusted customers do is they'll come to the table and say, I have 4 bills of material that are all good to go. Let's talk about which one of these we can source the fastest. And so really leveraging their electrical design teams to beat some of these supply chain concerns.
Exactly. And looking at the slide here, like that 4th bullet point down, talking about container shipping. I don't know, about 6 to 8 months ago, they were talking about how there's cargo containers that are just sitting out there off the coast of California, just couldn't even come in, right? And, they're a big importer and exporter. Down here in Texas, in the Southeast region, the Port of Houston is one of the largest exporters in the country. And our port is open. It's shameless plug. Anyways, my wife actually works there. It's pretty solid. But there's things where, like, for Texas, you think, oh, oil and gas. But no, it's not just that. We're very diverse, right? So our port has been open nonstop, and you can see on a day-to-day basis these cargo containers coming in and out. Now, with that being said, like Toyota, right, for example, has Gulf States Toyota, and there's a lot of Toyotas that are built here in Texas as well as coming across. And what happens is, on the north side of Houston, there's a giant parking lot. I drive by it every single day. It's right by Intercontinental Airport. And before pandemic, that thing was filled to the brim with Toyotas. I'm talking any kind of Toyota. Since pandemic and since all the chip shortages, you go by there, it's like it's a graveyard. There's like nothing. And I know each and every one of you probably experienced it. If you got to take a vehicle in to get maintenance or whatever, you look at the car lots and they're empty. And by the time you get your car to go looked at, like, I want an oil change, you got a salesperson coming out like, I'll buy your car back from you. And you're like, no, thank you, it's paid off or whatever. But man, these things are hurting, and not just prototyping. It's hurting the whole industry altogether. So it's good to hear about, reshoring. It's good to hear about these larger companies developing and coming back to actually being able to build, ICs and components that we've always relied on Asia to produce. So things like that, it's not going to, change overnight, but it is going to get better, and you can see it, from a domestic standpoint for sure.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to hit on this slide is you will continue to see state-sponsored actors from a variety of countries utilize, a disregard for IP ownership as a differentiating factor for themselves. And what I mean by that is that there is almost no amount. If you give a contract manufacturer the ability to build your product, you say to yourself, well, I've got the firmware. It's okay. I'm going to program them here, so they'll just have a brick. There is a near guarantee that if a state-sponsored actor wants that firmware off of, that source code off your computer, they can get it. I've had government agencies sit down with me and tell me that that was actively occurring within my own organization. So it is a real concern. Some people try to mitigate that different ways, but it is very real. And just saying, well, I've got a really strong password on my Google Drive is not going to stop a determined state-sponsored actor who it is their job to get in there. So
exactly right. Very, very true. Can you go next slide for me? Yeah, so this kind of like talks about what we just mentioned before about procurement issues, lead times, things of that nature. Again, when it comes down to prototyping and the engineering side of things, I'm a firm believer of the 3 F's, and I'm pretty sure everybody on this call already knows that, form, fit, function, right? So you want to make sure that when you choose your board shop, you choose your contract manufacturer, do them a solid. Make sure that the packaging's right. Make sure everything's, those factors that I just talked about are built into the board. And not just that. What I also like to talk about is the 3P system. So there's always that prototyping and production. I've noticed a lot of engineers and a lot of other companies, they skip the whole pilot side of things. And I'm a firm believer of pilot, right? So you build your 1 to 5 or whatever you want to call it, prototypes, prove it out, make sure all that's solid and good. Hit that pilot, do a pilot run of 25 pieces or 50 pieces. Then develop a test, develop some kind of apparatus to make sure that's a good functional product, right? Knock out all those kinks before ramping up and going to production. A lot of the times, due to timing and trying to deploy quick, they skip that whole medium part and they go right into production. What happens? You as a customer are like, man, I need 10,000 of these yesterday. And by the way, there's some testing equipment. I need you to test it. Let me talk about the fallout. It's a whole lot of mess, because at the end of the day, we want to deliver you a product that when you open that boxing experience, you get that board and you have the reliability and assurability that it's going to work, right? And that's what I've been seeing here lately, especially right at the COVID side of things, because there's people who are working remotely. They're designing their boards. They're using programs like Altium to create their digital board. They're getting these things sent out to contract manufacturers. They're designing it, and sometimes there's little escapes. And being remote, being in a box, you get kind of frustrated because you're not really hands-on or on the floor kind of doing things. So it leads to a bad experience. Now, Brian, what do you think about that kind of situation? Like, where would you kind of agree with that as well, or what are your thoughts on kind of missing the whole meat and potatoes between prototyping and production? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just certain universal constants, and one of them is that you will go through those phases of the product development lifecycle. Whether you believe that they are occurring or not, you will go through them. And so there is a desire. One of the pieces on this slide kind of talks about how procurement issues have affected PCBA manufacturing. And there's a desire to secure those key components. Everybody realized like a couple years back now that one of the ways you could kind of beat the supply chain problem was to just buy all your components in advance. And so what we see a lot of people doing is they say, well, my annual usage is 10,000 units, so I want to place an order for 10,000 units. That's excellent, no problem. What we can do is source those 10,000 units, source that bill of materials, and then still go through that, pilot, prototype, pilot, early development, and then high volume production stages, and work out the kinks at each stage kind of collaboratively, right? Because you're gonna go there is one thing that's always certain, and then there is a next generation of the device planned or in someone's brain or on someone's computer. So the only constant in life here is change, and so you're gonna make these changes. And so doing that with kind of open eyes about being at the correct step in the process is crucial. Yeah, Mary, what do you got?
Can y'all speak to the timeline impacts when you are prototyping and then you are changing and going to a different fab house for your mass production stage? Because I know that's something that a lot of people are interested, and it's a common occurrence when you're using fabrication houses that only have the ability to prototype.
Yeah, I mean, there's a significant benefit, and Chris can probably talk about this more than I can, but there's a significant benefit to being able to do your prototype ramp and your production, your high volume production at the same facility, right? Like there are process constraints and you know, tweaks to the line and all sorts of individual kind of process things that happen in the manufacture of a product. And so having the ability to go to scale there is really helpful. Because what inevitably happens is when people make those changes, what is the impact to my product? You're going to go back to square one, and we can potentially, you know, skip some steps or go through them quickly if the changes are small. Oh, we just need a different resistor value or cap value. Those are small changes, but you still need to verify the electrical design. You still need to verify the production parameters. You're still going to have to jump through some of those steps in order. In terms of like timeline, timeline cost, depends on the nature of the change. We've seen people make really small changes. The impact of the timeline's not too bad. And we've seen people come back and say, you know, these two boards don't talk to each other. Like I can't get the wireless communication figured out. We're going to go back to the drawing board. Which is, you know, a case where I'm glad we hadn't built 10,000 of them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, when it comes to like timeline, it really comes down to the scope of the project, right? So if an engineer or a buyer from a company comes in and they say, look, we need you know, a few of these, we're going to work with board houses or fabricators that we know that can produce to scale, right? So you would work those prototypes or small volume productions with them, and at the same time they have the files, they know what they could do. And when there's a time to turn the switch on and say, hey, look, now I need 10,000 by a week, things of that nature, you know, you want to have that marriage together, right? And in that partnership. Same thing with your CM, right? So, and I'm talking about this, I'm trying to be neutral, right? When it comes to a CM, you as a customer need to partner with that CM, meaning, you know, talk to them, tell them the scope of the project, saying this is what we're looking for between now, here, and the future. And kind of, you know, work that in regards. At the same time, that value CM is going to do their due diligence in the same thing. They have suppliers, they have brokers they can work with, they have fab shops that they can utilize to make sure that there's little to no downtime in switching between a prototype to a full-scale production. We know there's going to be a ramp up, and there's going to be some time that needs to have for delay, but that's what makes companies like Microfab so great, is because we're very, very diverse. And I'm going to touch back on a couple of pain points that we had, you know, a couple of years back, and that was Chinese New Year. If we're producing or trying to get fabricated boards through, let's say, Taiwan, and Chinese New Year pops up, well, guess what? If that's your single source supplier for bare fabs, you're in trouble, right? Because that means they're going to be out of work for a week. So you got to be kind of preemptive on that. Since then, you know, we've actually learned different aspects to make it better and more robust for our customers. You know, you got to dual source, sometimes even triple source product. So at sometimes, you know, that may be cost effective, or sometimes it may add additional cost. But that's where a true good CM like Microfab is going to work with you and the customer, or the customer, to be very transparent. Meaning, hey, look, you guys and gals, you need 100,000 boards in 3 weeks' time. This fab shop can do it for X amount of dollars, or we have an alternative. We can do it here domestically. It's going to be done at the same point in time. What it's going to cost you an additional monetary value. And this is one of those things, right? Timelines are very hard to do. Trust me, being in manufacturing, I deal with so many orders in a given week. Most traditional CMs will do anywhere between 1 to 5 orders a week, whereas Microfab, we do anywhere between 35 and 1.75 orders in a given week. And that could be a 1 piece up to 100 pieces. So there's things that take in consideration. There's forecasting, there's bare fabs, there's parts, procurement, getting those parts in, and just like mentioned before, long lead times. And I haven't even touched base on another one, which is consignment. And I'll go ahead and get into that in a minute. But yeah, when it comes down to your initial question, timelines are best talked about up front. That way there's no hidden gotchas, you know, and you can work out with the sales team or another CM's inside sales team, or whatever you want to call it, to make sure that the scope of the project is on time. And there's going to be little to no unforeseen issues going forward. Now, I mentioned consignment, right? So consignment is another key contributor for this. So a lot of times, you as an engineer or you as a buyer or whatever you want to call it, you may have a desire to go to 1,000 boards. And kind of like what Brian said before, let's say you went out and bought this end-of-life component. You bought 10,000 of these things, and you have them in your stock levels, and you want a contract manufacturer like Microfab to build it up for you. And let's say Microfab orders 99% of it, and that 1% is that one part that you're going to consign. As a manufacturer, my thing would be, if you're going to consign it, make sure that you're getting it from a supplier that's recognized, that has, you know, proper packaging, that you know that it's been taken care of, not just off the street in a Ziploc baggie and here you go, this is Alibaba special. No, we're going to make sure that those parts are going to be reliable, because there's nothing worse than you as a customer consigning parts. We do the workmanship, we provide you the end result, and you go to plug in the device and you hit go or hit that green light and it doesn't function. And that's unfortunate. And I've actually been seeing some of those instances happen, and it leads to a negative experience. And so for my ask as a manufacturing director is just make sure that, you know, you do your due diligence, make sure if you're going to source these parts and consign them, make sure they got good integrity. Be very careful of what you order overseas. You know, we've also experienced, you know, counterfeit parts, and we haven't really talked about that, but that's a real thing. And unfortunately, we got hit with that not too long ago. And it's just one of those things, you know, you just got to be very, very careful. How about you, Brian? During your experience doing manufacturing, all that, have you ran into any problems where you had some major issues with consignment, or you had some parts that didn't function?
Yeah. So I mean, the counterfeit parts thing is really has gotten really interesting in the past few years, right? Because it used to be that, yeah, there's counterfeit parts out there, but the supply chain was so, you know, filled to the brim with legitimate parts that, you know, if you can order things from DigiKey and Mauser and like known good distributors that have direct links to the factories, you know, you didn't really have to worry about it very much. Well, what we see now is, you know, an inverse relationship between cost and lead time, right? And so, like, yeah, like let's say a $1 IC, it was $1 a few years ago. You can have that $1 IC in 6 weeks for $100, or you can have it at the 52-week lead time for $1, like it was. So it becomes very lucrative for some of these, like, essentially chip, you know, counterfeit operations to go after some of these, you know, very in-demand chips. And there's actually a pretty high level of sophistication in them. And so what we see a lot of the time in more extreme operating environment electronics designs, like that might use a lot of like automotive components or be for like harsher use environments, is the counterfeit parts will work. Like they'll have the desired functionality. They'll boot up the first time, but instead of having a, you know, let's say 150°C temperature rating, they have a 50°C temperature rating. And so when you put them under the hood of a car, they just shut right off. Or they have a greatly degraded overall lifespan. And so, you know, those devices power up in the lab and work through functional test, but when they go to the customers, you know, they have a you know, a 100-hour lifetime and not a 100,000-hour lifetime. So see those issues. And then, yeah, touching on the consignment piece, it is absolutely, like everything Chris said is absolutely crucial to building high quality assemblies, right? Like a lot of times these parts are viewed like commodity items, and so, well, I can just buy them on DigiKey with my company credit card, the parts show up, everything should be fine. But there are handling requirements, there are moisture sensitivity requirements, ESD requirements. And then, you know, a lot of people will try to save a penny here or there, especially when the parts are constrained, and say, well, I've got 5 parts and I taped them to the outside of this bag. It's like, can you build me 5 more complete boards with these parts? And it's the analogy I like to use with people is like, it would be like, you know, it would be like showing up to a restaurant. You're like, hey, I brought my own steak. Can you guys use my steak? Can you guys just cook it for me and serve it to me? I'd be like, no, why do you want to do that? Like, you know, and they said, we want to control the entire experience you get here. And like, I don't know, did you have that in your car? Like, where was that? And you know, when you think about it that way, that a good contract manufacturer is trying to provide like a great top level experience for you, and is buying things from you know, known good supply chains, things like that, it kind of puts it in a little bit more perspective sometimes.
Absolutely. Very, very true. You go next slide, please. There we go. So the way most CMs, you know, I don't want to speak for every CM because there's so many out there, but you know, traditional CMs, you know, you have like an ERP system, MRP system. You have a server. You host your files on the server. They have customers' assembly drawings, bill materials, all that jazz, right? Nowadays, you know, due to like digital manufacturing and stuff of that nature, you know, like Microfab, for example, you know, we're very transparent. So what happens is basically when you upload your Gerber, your bill materials, you see your image there of your board. It's wonderful. Now, when you talk about, you know, risks and ways to like mitigate that, the thing about it is we actually had a customer. It wasn't a true customer yet, right? They were actually having boards produced at a previous CM for many, many years. Well, that CM went out of business. And when they went out of business, they took along with them all the information to build this customer's product. So these 2 customers, they came to us and were like, hey, when did these boards built? And I was like, okay, well, do you have anything? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, scratching my no hair. I'm like trying to figure out, okay, then how do you want us to build your boards if you don't have any Gerbers, schematics, bill material? He's like, well, let me see what I can do. So the next meeting, he brought over, I'm not lying to you, it was like a piece of paper like with notes on it. He was able to get access to a little bit of the Gerber. But things like that is old school mentality, right? Nowadays, everything's digital. You can upload it, it's saved, there's a repository, there's a place to keep stuff. And that's how Microfab runs. So it's one of those things where if we have the data, we can deploy that at any factory. You know, we can produce it here, we can produce that at our high-speed factories. You know, it's just one of those things. And a lot of CMs traditionally can do that, but at a different level, okay? So the way Microfab does it is basically, you know, depending on what you're trying to build or what we're trying to incorporate into the build process for you and your products, is we want to make sure it's a good fit, right? So if you're doing high scale production, we have a factory for that. If we have a prototype, we have a factory for that. And at the same time, it's one single source of truth. And that truth is what you upload. You're uploading your Gerber, your bill material, and things of that nature. So it's pretty cool. And you know, I've been with Microfab for 6 years, and that's one thing that led me here was like the change in the way the industry was progressing, right? Being the pioneers in doing the digital manufacturing space was awesome, and it still is. And it's just one of those things where, you know, as our company grows, you know, and seeing more and more customers kind of go towards us for knowledge base and building their processes and boards and all those kind of things, it's very intriguing. And I know down here in the slide, you talk about EVT, DVT, and PVT. Those are all wonderful things. At the end of the day, customer wants 2 things. They want a quality product delivered on time, bottom line. There's always cost, right? Obviously, that's a big benefactor as well. But it's also about retention and about how you treat that customer and work with that customer. You know, every CM, they're gonna you know, boast they're the best, we have best quality, all that. But the truth of the matter is, you know, there's always going to be these little unforeseen issues. There may be a slight issue on a part or a workmanship issue, but all CMs build off the basic workmanship, and that's IPC. So depending on your CM, what I would suggest to you as a customer is work with your CM very well. You know, talk to them. Tell them your scope of your project. Tell them what you're looking for. Tell them about the need for future forecast, things of that nature, and be very transparent. Because Macrofab is very transparent with their customers, and it should be vice versa. Now, with that being said, Brian, what do you feel about the whole, you know, how Macrofab can handle like changes on the fly when it comes to, if I'm trying to upload this Lipton iced tea and I want to change it mid-process, how do you think that Macrofab can handle that situation?
Well, I mean, so change management is probably one of the hardest things for any contract manufacturer to work through, right? So being able to use the digital platform, that digital package as a source of truth is really kind of one of the hallmarks of the ways that we do business, right? What we see very often, and this is kind of the story you were talking about, where a contract manufacturer closed. When we see people come back for reshoring activities, they say, I'm done with the CM I was with overseas. There's too many issues. We're gonna explore building it here. We say, great. Let's see that digital documentation package. What do you got? And they're like, well, I've got Gerbers and I've got a BOM that's in another language, with parts that are sourced, you know, from that local host country, and that BOM is, you know, it's 2 years old. And I know they've made changes since then. It's like, okay, well, what that contract manufacturer has done is you know, weaponized that change management process. And we see this, unfortunately, we see this happen a lot, where they say, oh, well, this, you know, this part's out of stock. Don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. We'll just keep that close to ourselves. And then ultimately the documentation progresses to a point that contract manufacturer holds all the cards, right? And they've never circled back and updated the customer's digital documentation package that they have access to. And I see that happen a lot. And working through customers, working through issues with customers to support those reshoring activities is really pretty painful for them, because a lot of these people, you know, don't know that their design forked 6 years ago, and that they have what they think are manufacturable files, but it does not in any way match the devices and assemblies that they're actually, you know, selling and delivering to customers. And so a lot of times we have to be the bearer of that bad news that they've been almost scammed or kind of victimized by some of these places.
Totally agree on that, for sure. Absolutely. So this is a really touching base on, you know, a true and accurate statement, right? Like I said before, you know, a lot of companies boast, oh, I can do this in X amount of time. Well, that's from when they actually start producing the product. You know, companies like Macrofab, for example, you know, we also offer like a 10-day service, and our 10-day service is at the point of PO. So the minute you click that button and say, I'm paying $1, whatever you want to call it, you're paying this money. We have 10 days. We have 10 days to procure that fab. We have 10 days to procure that part. And at the same point in time, build it in a good quality stance. That way, when you open it and you have your opening box experience, that you're delighted. And that's one thing that I can really hold to, because it is a challenge, but at the same time, as it being a challenge, it's fun. Meaning, it's a challenge and it's fun, and it's one of those things where, you know, being a true 10-day supplier is a real thing. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I can do it in 10 days, but really it took 20 days because I really didn't get the part until, you know, X day. And a lot of these prototype companies boast that, or they're like, yeah, we can get you 10 boards tomorrow. Yeah, is it one component, a 2-layer board? No. You know, things like that, right? That's a differentiator, and it comes back to being able to select your CM. And I'm not trying to do this like a dog and pony show and say, look, go with Macrofab. We are the #1, you know, supplier when it comes to CM stuff. Are we great? Yes, we are. But you know what? It's up to you to make sure you make that transition. That if you're unhappy with your supplier that you're with right now, you know, give us a shot. Talk to us. One of those things. And our sales teams are there to help you and kind of work through. And some engineers don't even want to do that. Some engineers want to actually just, you know, go through our platform, upload the data, upload their bill of material, and kind of see where we stand. And then from there, like, yeah, let's buy, or no, we'll see about it later. Things like that, right? So when it comes down to it, the bottom line is any CM wants to take care of you as a customer. You know, it's all about delighting the customer and creating a great experience for you. And that's kind of how it is when we start talking about, again, the state side of things versus overseas. I really feel like the whole industry is kind of shifting to have things come back to the States. You know, and I'm not just talking about US, I'm also talking about North America. So I'm throwing Canada in there, I'm throwing Mexico in there. It's one of those things where, you know, you want to build to quality. And I truly feel like overseas, you're not really getting that quality that is really, you know, kind of beaten in when it comes to domestic production, right? So same kind of thing, you know, when it comes down to it, and you're looking for a good partnering system when it comes to prototyping through pilots to production, you know, keep us in mind. You know, it's just one of those things where it's going to benefit both parties, because at the end of the day, like I said before, it comes down to the quality and delivery. And of course, for you, it's about cost. So if we add all those together, you know, it comes out to be a great deal. So it's not trying to be a sales pitch. I'm just trying to tell you what works. And those that know me know I'm very transparent and I don't sugarcoat. I just kind of tell it as it is. So, Brian, do you have anything to speak on that point?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you talk about, you know, location, right? What you're really talking about is access to resources and long-term stability, right, for a product. When a lot of this offshoring, when a lot of these offshoring activities started, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, people did the risk analysis and they looked at it and they said, well, you know, we've got a potential labor pool, we've got factories that can do this work. Yeah, there's additional costs in these areas, and yeah, there's maybe additional risk, but overall, this is a net benefit for the company. I think, you know, with some of the current geopolitical stability and, you know, the way that COVID and, you know, everything that comes with that has, you know, upset kind of the global marketplace, those calculations, you know, should be thoughtfully reconsidered. And, you know, we're just one operator mistake away from the Strait of Taiwan becoming a really problematic hotbed, right? As I'm sure a lot of the people on this call are aware, a huge portion of the world's ultra high quality semiconductors are made by TSMC in Taiwan, and so that is, you know, that's the crown jewel of electronics manufacturing, right? It's just at the heart of so many pieces to the current global economy. And, you know, if that goes, you know, a certain geopolitical direction, we're going to have potentially some problems there. And so looking at that political instability and factoring in the potential cost of that is an important piece to the calculation that I don't think was being done previously.
Exactly right. So it looks like we've got a blank screen here. We've got a question?
Yeah, we had a question come in. One of the people attending the webinar wanted to know if you had an opinion on the open hardware project.
Opinion?
I'm not super familiar with it. Sort of like open source software, but for hardware?
For hardware, yeah. So.
Yeah, so
if you're not familiar, you can't really. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I'll be neutral on that in that regard.
Okay. So, but we have about 15 minutes left in the webinar, so we have just a few more slides left. And then if anybody else does have any questions, please type them in the panel and we'll get to them at the very end.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. Yeah, so this is touching base, pretty much everything we've already kind of spoken about, you know, talking about IP, the strong CM relationship, you know, customer experience, quality labor. These are all just, you know, key points of what we've already kind of discussed. So we really don't need to hash that out again. Go to the next slide. Same kind of thing. So this is talking about, when it comes to advantage of working with Macrofab, like I said, I kind of went over that already. So basically, when it comes to Macrofab and the way we develop is we want to take it from prototype to production, right? And we want to take it to the quickest avenue to get there with little to no issues. I mean, obviously issues may arise, and it's one of those things where just communicating, sometimes even over communicating helps to understand the scope of the project, making sure that everything kind of lays in line and being able to produce to the magnitude that the customer needs. So, I mean, the advantage of it is, like I said before, is factories, right? So when you think of Macrofab, we have multiple factories across different regions to produce product at a reliable rate and try to achieve to what you need as a customer. Sometimes you do need things in a month, sometimes you need things in a couple of weeks. And the whole point of Macrofab is to being able to accommodate for that, from a small scale to a large scale. And the great thing about what we do here is, especially, let's say, I'm gonna use an example, right? So we're located in Houston, Texas, right? And in Texas, especially on the Gulf Coast, your risk of hurricanes. And hurricane season can come in, it's actually going on right now. And if for some reason, we're impacted by a catastrophe like that, and we have to shut down, it's very simple for us to move our product to one of our factories to get it continued on. So it's gonna be very little downtime versus a lot of other CMs may have a single source location where if they have a catastrophic event happen or Mother Nature decides to run rampant, you're at risk. You're at risk of not having your product out on time. Whereas with us, it's a simple of getting that product moved, shipped over, and built as soon as possible. So it works out very well in that regard, right? It's all about capacity. And capacity could be done here at HQ. It just depends, right? It depends on the amount of lines you're running, the speed you're running, what's coming down the forecast. So those are a couple of little takeaways that is a great advantage for Macrofab. The other thing too is just, like I said, it's about being transparent. You know what you're getting. If you're coming in as a self-service user and you're using our platform, you're going to see a delivery. You're going to see a time. You're going to see things that may have an issue, like there's no more to find in the market, or we need an alternate. You're going to see things of that nature. If you're coming in as a buyer for a large company, you're going to work with associates that can help you, fix your bill material, work on AVLs, try to find alternate sourcing. You're going to have engineers that are going to work alongside you. Oh, this part doesn't fit. It's violating a design rule check or DRC, things of that nature. So you're going to get that really hands-on, white glove experience that you rightly deserve. And Brian, can you talk a couple points off of that as well from your side of things?
Yeah, no, the platform and having that single digital repository is such a differentiator, right? Like I can't tell you how many times we've run into issues with customers because they're trying to maintain version control in some big complicated Excel spreadsheet that they're all shared and they're all using together. And so we mentioned to them that you can just kind of upload this stuff to the platform and get a pretty plug and play version of version control, revision control that has a software type interface. It's such a benefit for them just from a data management point of view. And then the ability to say, hey, okay, I want one board, 100, 1,000, 10,000, all through the same data management platform is huge for a lot of people because a lot of companies are the volume pricing you get at 100,000 units and the hand-holding kind of concierge service you need to get one unit over the finish line are different kind of skill sets and kind of different companies. And we've managed to build an organization that can scale that way. So.
Absolutely. And you hit on the key point there, scale, right? So it's all about scaling. We're going to have customers that they have a certain amount of boards they want built per year. It's never going to change. It's X amount. Then you have other ones that oh wow, we did 5,000 for you guys last year. I want to ramp it up to 100K next year. You know, being a CM and being able to scale with that customer works dividends, because you keep that initial work with the CM who's traditionally built your normal boards with you, and scaling it to a level to where now you're meeting their customers' demands, and you're still with the same CM. And that's where the whole working with Macrofab makes it great, because there's nothing lost in translation, right? You don't have to take your Gerber, take your bill of material, go to another CM shop and redo the whole thing again, you know, which could lead to, you know, part issues or delivery issues or quality issues. You know, once you're invested in Macrofab and you're working with Macrofab, you know, you're part of the family. And it's one of those things where you just continue to grow and continue to scale. So we've had customers before like, oh, you guys have built, you know, 100,000 boards for us. I want to do 1 million boards. Are y'all the right fit? Absolutely. Because we got you to that step of getting to 100,000, and we're here for the ride. You know, we're here to get you up to 1 million units, you know, per year. And this is one of those things, you know, it may be built at a high speed line that we do. It may be on a smaller scale line that we do. It just depends on the actual application. So those are the great things about working on Macrofab. It makes it very unique, because most traditional CMs don't work in that regard. So it makes it a very fun atmosphere for sure. Next slide. Key takeaways. All right. So yeah, we'll just touch base on these one at a time. Not a big deal, but you know, North American manufacturers provide fast and easy PCBA prototyping. We talked about that. Again, there's so many different avenues in that regard. You know, we have domestic PCBA shops that offer a quick turn overnight, you know, fab at a higher dollar rate. There's other fab shops that can do it at a lower rate but longer turn time. You know, number 2 bullet point, in North America, IP is better protected. I totally support that. You know, in my prior life, I was doing some oil and gas stuff, right? And oil and gas stuff, pretty much all your bare boards, anything when it comes down to boards for downhole, that's maintained domestically. You know, you're not going to go out and source boards to Asia for that. You're not going to go any of that kind of stuff. It's typically, it's American based, it's domestic based stuff for oil and gas. And I understand that, because, you know, they're building things that are going down in the earth, high dollar, high reliability, and you don't want to skimp. You know, you're not going to skimp on the quality, you're not going to skimp on delivery. So you kind of want to keep it into the States. So I totally agree with that statement on number 2. Number 3, manufacturing prototyping can be done in one place with cloud manufacturers. Yes, you know, so Macrofab was a pioneer for digital cloud-based manufacturing. You know, and one of those things that's what kind of what intrigued me when I came here, was being able to just have it online. You know, you could be at home and let's say you got this, oh, I'm going to build the next best thing. You can go onto our platform and start working away at it. And that's cool. Like, that is so cool. Dedicated North American-based team in the same time zone? Absolutely. Like I mentioned before, you know, we talk about North America. I'm not talking about just America itself, but, you know, Canada, Mexico, one of those things, right? If you have a means where you want to go cheaper on the labor and you have a larger volume, then we have options. We have options down south of the border. You know, we have options north of the border, those kind of things. And the last but not least is, you know, access to multiple high production lines. Key word here is elastic, right? Being able to ebb and flow. Any contract manufacturer is going to tell you one of the biggest pain points that they're going to have is changing a setup during a build, or stopping a production line and waiting. Because when your machine is not placing, you're losing this. So a lot of the times, you know, when you're running a high volume line, you can't afford to stop. It's all go. Like, you need to really produce. The unique thing about Macrofab is we can source those factories, those lines, to accommodate that. So we talk with our CMs, we vet our CMs, we vet our lines, we make sure that there's going to be a proper form, fit, function, even when it comes down to the manufacturing of a product line. So, and again, it all comes down to being elastic, right? To be able to shrink and grow, especially in today's time frame where it comes down to supply chain constraints. We may be able to forecast, oh wow, we can build, you know, 10,000 of these in 2 months. When that second month comes around, maybe there's a miss on delivery of an IC. right? We need to be able to start and stop that line with very to little interruptions from that CM or that traditional line to you as a customer. And that's where one of the biggest things that we have is being able to be flexible. So those key takeaways are great. Brian, do you have any verbiage on any of that? Well, it looks like we have a question.
Well, we have two, but if Brian has something else to add, that's great.
Brian.
I want to hear these questions.
Okay, so we had two questions come in before we wrap up, and we're hitting right at time here. But one person asked if they had a rough prototype that they are working on, but they said that it's a little rough, it's not pretty. When do they come forward and talk to Macrofab about moving forward?
Now.
And
let me see why that is, right? And so one of the most provided there's some level of confidence that the board will work or you will learn something, right? Like if you're just starting to sketch it out, it's probably not a, you want something that's buildable, you want something that's manufacturable, you want something that's going to add value. If you go make one, like, okay, does it do anything for you? If it's just going to be, a dead hunk of fiberglass, well, then that's probably not very useful. But one of the most beneficial exercises I see potential customers go through is getting a quote. And I don't think a lot of people understand like the number of people involved in the quoting process and the level of effort that goes into like the back end of the software and how many people are going to individually review the files and are willing to talk with you about them and really kind of ask questions that are like ask probing questions like, why did you do that? What is this? I look at a lot of boards all day. Why did you do that? Those type things. It's really giving you, a free opportunity to bounce that design and what you're trying to accomplish off of a seasoned manufacturing group. So it doesn't cost you anything if you don't buy anything. So
right. The other question was somebody was asking if they were, and I'm not sure exactly if this is what they're asking. They said, what about testing? My testers are not at an alternative location. So I guess they're asking if they're moving their testing, what are the ramifications of that?
Yeah, so the testing is a huge gamut, right? All the way from power it on and I see an LED, all the way to full, bed and nails, pogo pin, individual, in-circuit tests, programming, that whole thing. And so on that gamut, we'll determine with customers where they need to be. And if you've got offsite testers, haven't run into a situation yet where they can't be moved, but if they just cannot be moved, we have logistical ways that we can accommodate that. But typically testing is part of any testing, programming, and like those additional checks like that are going to be part of any, well thought out manufacturing program.
Great. Well, great guys, you did a wonderful job. It's very informative, and we appreciate everybody who showed up today to be with us for this webinar. So please keep an eye out in your inbox that you used to register today. We're going to be sending you a little treat for coming and joining us today. And don't forget to register for our August 25th webinar. Brian is going to be presenting again for that one. So it's going to be another informative one on why your electronics teams cannot deliver on time. So that's going to be a really good one. Thanks very much to both of you.
And gals, pleasure meeting you, and take it easy. Welcome.